Welcome to another episode of Management Muse. I'm your host, Cindy Baldy, and this is my husband and co-host, Jeffrey Tumlin.
Yellow! Welcome to the podcast where we try to inspire better work performance. Thanks for listening.
Hello, Musers. Today is the second of 3 mini episodes with Jefferson B. Howell. Beak had a 37-year career in the Marines, with his last position being a lieutenant general. From there, he went on to be the director of the Johnson Space Center, and then a member of the faculty at the LBJ School at the University of Texas at Austin, which is where we met him. This mini episode, Beak is going to share a leadership experience about keeping your composure for the people you lead, even when you may be getting the fuzzy end of the lollipop stick.
Crisis averted. You got over the mini mutiny. You built a strong squadron. You get back to Hawaii. You're setting records. Everybody loves each other. And so then tell us what happens in the waning days of this now great squadron command.
We were deployed to Japan for another 6-month deployment.
Okay, back to Japan.
Japan is just for the source of all problems for you.
In our second month, my group commander calls me in. He said, I've got something here that, he said, it's sort of a plum.
Yeah.
At the same time, it's a hell of a challenge with a lot of responsibility. He said, our air group has been selected to provide one of our fighter squadrons to go up to Misawa, Japan, and get with a Japanese fighter squadron and train them in air combat tactics. The Japanese want to become more aggressive. They were always defensive.
Sure.
Now they want to get into the dogfighting.
Sure.
And they like to get it from the Marines. And he said, your squadron, it's obvious you got the best pilots and the squadron's doing better than anybody. And I'd like for you to do this. I said, we'll do it. And so we organized. I had a bunch of Top Gun graduates in my squadron. These guys were good. And it's all I could do to keep up with them flying the jet. I was pretty good, but I wasn't as good as some of these guys. They were wonderful. And so I was very fortunate.
Yeah.
Because the fellow before me had packed the squadron with talent.
Yeah.
And so this was the same group we'd had over there before, and we had a few additions while we were in Hawaii, but the nucleus was there of both troops and officers. And so we were tight. We were really tight, and we got back to Japan, and everybody's chomping at the bit, ready to go.
Yeah, like night and day.
Oh, yeah.
From the first time in Japan when they were
mutiny.
Very confident.
Slashing your tires.
At the same time, just willing to do what was necessary to do things right, have good airplanes and good.
Yeah. And you'd replace the two problematic senior enlisted.
They were gone. And they've been long gone.
Helped your group kind of cohere around.
Yeah.
Okay.
And my new sergeant major and I had a long talk when he reported in. I told him what had occurred.
Yeah. And
he got with the staff NCOs and sort of read them the riot act, as sergeant majors can do.
I'm well aware.
So he was. This was the first aviation unit he'd been in. He was always been with infantry and artillery, so he was a tough.
Sure, I bet, tough cookie.
So, but he was highly respected, and so anyway, things were really going swimmingly, and so we put together a detachment of 6 aircraft, and I led them up to Misawa, and we set up a training syllabus for to train these fellas. It was going to be a 2-week episode, and it was going to be, our first week would be 1 versus 1 type of training, energy comparisons between aircraft, and then the initial moves you make one-on-one and that type of thing.
Sure.
And so and then the next week would be multi 2 versus 2, which can get a little hairy. You got that many 4 airplanes in the sky at the same time together.
Yep.
Maneuvering against each other.
Yeah, I bet that could get a little woolly.
So but the syllabus was excellent.
Sure.
And we had rules of engagement that we preached before when we got with them initially, and then they had to be briefed every hop. The rules of engagement had to be repeated.
And a hop is a flight?
A flight.
Okay.
Takeoff to a landing.
Okay.
And some of the key rules of engagement were if we had hard decks, we call them, that at certain altitudes you cannot go below. If you went below, the fight was off.
Okay.
Because that way it gave all of our jets time if you lost control of the jet, which you can do in that kind of a situation, to recover your aircraft out of a spin or whatever, because a hard deck was up at 10,000 feet.
It's a little time.
So all the fighting went above 10,000 feet up to about 22,000 feet. And you had to have, when you engage, you had to have everybody in sight. If you cannot enter a mature engagement, in other words, two people going at each other, you cannot enter that fight unless you had everybody in sight. And we all preached that and briefed it. And we had to all be done in English. Everything. I said, we don't know Japanese, and all these guys do English. Yeah. So all the controllers from the ground, we had radar controllers controlling the aircraft up over the ocean, and everything was in English, even with Japanese controllers and with the flight. So that was strictly enforced. And the first week up there went very well, very smoothly. And we found out they were flying a little supersonic fighter called the Mitsubishi F1. Yeah. Little needle-nose fighter aircraft that had a limited radar and had a air-to-air capability with both a gun and a radar and a heat-seeking missile they carried. And, of course, we had a better weapon system than they did. And what was really unusual was our aircraft, side by side, we found out in the energy comparisons, we could outmaneuver them at slower speeds, pull more Gs and get inside their turn radius, which for an F-4 was very unusual.
Yeah, sure,
the F-4 was sort of considered to be a hog as a close-in fighter, and so you never wanted to be out of energy in the F-4. You were in a lot of trouble.
Right.
And so, but we were getting behind these guys easily, and so our instruction would normally end up when we got into actually fighting each other in our engagements was to be, after a couple of turns, the F-4 would be at an advantage, and before calling a kill, you would say knock it off in the flight and set up another one, and then debrief these things when you got back. And so we were trying not to rub it in. Right,
because you weren't trying to simulate that you were killing them every time.
No, and they knew and we knew.
Right.
And their fangs were starting to come out.
Right. They're starting to get
frustrated
because you were always getting an advantage on them, and
so
they're getting embarrassed.
The second week, we that Monday, first day of the second week, I got the first op, and I'm flying against the squadron commander of the Japanese.
Squadron commander to squadron commander.
Yeah.
Okay.
Except I have a wingman.
Sure.
Pagan. His call sign was Pagan. And I've got in my back seat is my regular backseater.
Yeah.
Clutch McCutcheon.
Yep.
And he had Coyote in his backseat. So that was our flight. And then there were two of them. They were single-seat fighters. And so we had two people in the Phantom. But the way we set these up, these 2 versus 2 engagements, would be separated by 30 miles.
Wow.
Turn in and then come at each other. And when you got a visual, the fight was on.
Yep.
And so they had, the controllers controlling us from the ground, setting us up and turning us in. And on our first engagement, on our radars, we saw them very quickly that they had gotten, instead of flying together, one of them was trailing the other one by a couple of miles back in a trail formation. And we figured out their tactics was to try to get us to merge on the lead guy so the second guy could come in and get a kill. And we'd seen that before.
Right, yeah.
And so we sorted that out, made a contract in the flight that if the first guy engaged, whoever he engaged with would fight him, and then the wingman would go after their wingman.
Right. So you wouldn't get set up like that.
If he blew through, then you'd let him go and we'd engage the second guy and get a kill on him before we went after the other guy. And that was sort of our contract in our fight. And so it happened just as we thought it might. The first guy coming through was the wingman, actually. The CO had put his wingman out in front of him, sort of trolling. You know?
Yeah, sure.
And he sees me, I see him, and we do a very close pass.
Yeah.
Left to left pass. and I make a hard turn toward him, and he just keeps going supersonic and gone. You know?
Right.
When you're going opposite directions in jets,
not going to get him.
It's a lot of separation very quickly.
Yeah,
and so he was gone, and he said, okay, we'll just take the second guy. Merged on him. He sees me too. He doesn't see
This is
John.
the CO.
Pagan is about a mile and a half from me in a stepped up position. And so when the leader and I engage and turn on each other, Tegan's already coming in to get behind him for a shot. And so I saw the Mitsubishi bled energy very quickly when they went to a hard turn. And so I could see the minute his nose fell below the horizon, I could see he would not be able to get his nose up.
Yeah.
So I just went in the vertical. I still had a lot of knots on my airplane, and I went straight up above him.
Right.
And then John was getting around behind. By the time I kick it around, he's down below. They're a couple of miles below me, and he and John is working. He sees John, and so he's trying to hold off John so John can't get a shot on him. And that's sort of the scenario. And so at that moment, you know, it's all happening very quickly, but Clutch and I say, okay, we need to do a belly check. The wingman ought to be getting into this thing again.
Right.
And so I'm looking down.
Yeah, you're looking for the other Japanese.
I'm looking down there, and so I
aircraft.
rolled inverted just so we could make sure nobody was coming up underneath us. And nobody's there. And so as I'm rolling back, bam! That's when, you know, there's this big bang. And the wingman flew right in front of me and took the nose right off my airplane. The tip of my nose, not my nose, but the tip of my nose of my aircraft. And just a big bang, and all of a sudden confusion, noise. And I didn't even see him. It went so fast.
Wow.
We were just rolling back when this occurred.
Wow.
But the airplane, a lot of noise and racket, air rushing into the nose and where the radar was. And that's right in front of me as a pilot. And there's asbestos or nylon from the nose coming unraveled and beaten up on a canopy, and looks like it's going to go down the intakes. And so I'm trying to make sure I still have control of my aircraft. I wasn't sure because there's all this noise and confusion, but it followed directions. I tried to pull the nose up, and it came up and flying the aircraft, and I'm slowing down. And of course we call and knock it off. We've had a midair, and so, or something's happened. I wasn't really sure what had happened, frankly.
Sure.
So Pagan knocks it off and comes over to join me, and I'm pointing toward Misawa. We're about 80 miles out over the Sea of Japan, and I'm thinking, boy, that water looks cold. I hope I don't have to go in it today. And he comes and joins. I said, look me over. I think I ran into something, and I need just to check my aircraft, see if anything's leaking out of it or everything's there. Yeah. And he flew around me. He got up close and flew all the way around me and looked at things. And I'll never forget when he came up beside me, he said, Beak, there's something wrong with your nose.
Too funny.
I said,
we probably need to, that's kind of a funny joke because his nickname is Beak because of his nose.
And so the irony was quite obvious.
Too funny.
And so we declared an emergency and pointed it back toward Misawa and slowed down the aircraft. All that stuff that had come off the nose sort of wrapped back up on the nose cone and just flapping around up there. And the slower I go, the more things are looking more like normal, even though it isn't. And I'm very concerned about my hydraulics, because the hydraulics that controls your radar and the F4s also controls putting down the gear and also your flaps. And I just want to, and I realized I still had hydraulic pressure, so it looked like we were going to be okay. So I did a straight-in approach to Misawa and landed and got in okay, and we had called in to say we had an issue. And it was interesting seeing the plane captains when they bring in my aircraft in and seeing that nose with a damage on it, and the shock. And so my safety officer, Spider Island, comes out, and I'm getting out of poopy suit. We had survival suits on, and they're just hotter than blazes when you're on the ground. And I'm trying to get out of that thing and then go change. in the locker room, and Spider comes in after me and says, "Hey, I found this lodged in your nose. It's a piece of metal that doesn't belong there. It belongs to somebody else, you know."
Wow.
And so we realized it had been a mid-air. And when we got calls from the squadron, from the other squadron, saying we must debrief quickly as possible.
Yeah.
And please come over and we will debrief.
Wow.
And so we're walking over to their hangar, and I see their 2 aircraft parked there, and one has a big chunk of its tail missing, the stabilator on the back. It's got a big chunk of metal missing out of that, and that matches what I just dug out of my nose of my aircraft. And so we got in there and got in and debriefed the hop, and got everybody to agree what had happened. And basically, the wingman had violated the rules of engagement. He had come back. His skipper was calling to him in Japanese, telling him, "Get, this guy's about to shoot me. Come get him."
Yeah.
And he was going after. He saw John Graham pursuing him, and was doing what you call a high yo-yo maneuver to come down and try to get to John. And that's when he didn't see me, and he clipped. So, if you enter a mature engagement, he had to have 3 aircraft in sight, or he shouldn't have re-entered.
Right.
But he did. And he admitted it. It was his bad, and they all admitted to that. So we said, well, we learned a great lesson.
Hello, Management Musers. Today, I want to tell you a little something about our coaching products. If Lady Gaga and LeBron James both have coaches, why shouldn't you? We offer a variety of packages, all the way from a 12-session package aimed to help you build your management muscle to a 2-session package aimed to help you think through sticky issues and provide you with a second opinion. All our coaches have doctorates in the social sciences and years of real-world experience in business. So stop questioning yourself and pull the trigger. You're worth it. For more information, contact us at culsure.com. That's CULSURE.com. I think I remember this story from past conversations. Weren't you a little worried that you were in deep trouble?
No.
No? Okay.
I was very confident.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, not your fault.
It wasn't my fault. This kid, he broke the rules.
Okay.
And so I called down to my group commander on the phone and tell him what's going on.
And your group commander is what rank?
He's a colonel.
And you're a major?
I'm a major.
Okay.
Well, no, I'm a lieutenant colonel.
Okay, lieutenant colonel.
I've been promoted to lieutenant colonel. And he was an old fighter pilot. He understood. And so he said, well, you'll probably be hearing from the wing commander later on, or we'll let them know. And you need to get you got to put out a message. This was before satellite communications. I mean, was in its infancy, and it was all classified. Yeah. And we didn't have cell phones. They didn't exist, if you believe that. And so you either used a landline or teletype to communicate with each other. And so we went to base operations, got with their ops chief. Misawa was a joint use base, so it was owned by the Air Force but run by the Navy, and all services could use the base. It was a joint use base up there in northern Japan, northern Honshu. And so the ops chief was very helpful, got us to the right message to send out, which was called an OpRep Blue Blazer. And it meant that you get the attention of everybody all the way up to the Joint Chiefs of Staff, because it's an international incident.
Right, yeah.
It was an international incident midair between
an American
Marine fighter and a Japanese jet aircraft. And so we wrote out the message. You have a time limit, and we were very close to that limit. So we probably rushed through it too quickly, didn't really edit what we were writing, but we got it out.
Yeah.
And that thing goes all the way to headquarters, and to my commanding general was on Okinawa at that time, and he gets that message, and so the next, after our debrief, I end up at the club to eat and have a drink or two with my pals, and we celebrate still being alive, and the Japanese guys come over, and we have a few hooks together and get drunk, as a matter of fact, and ended up becoming blood brothers. We cut our hands with a knife and mixed our blood, and all that kind of, because the guy we'd had the midair with, it was all, part of the ritual.
Sure. It's kind of his way of saying he's sorry.
Well, it's just a way of, saying we almost bought the farm together, but we made it. And so it's a celebration.
Yeah.
And so that night I hit the rack very easily because I'm tired and half in the bag.
Sure.
But in the morning, awakened very early, 7 o'clock in the morning, by the group commander calling, saying...
What's his rank?
He's a colonel.
Okay, all right.
He's calling from Iwakuni.
Okay.
And to my BOQ room and says, hey, our general, General Maloney, wants to talk to you, our wing commanding general. He was a 2-star.
Okay.
And he said, he wants you to stay in your room until he calls you, and then he will talk to you personally. And he said, it's not good news. He said, people seem to be upset about what happened, and so the general will tell you. And so he said, just stand by. I just want to warn you that people higher up are not pleased with what happened.
Wow.
I said, well, I'm not pleased either, but we got through it. I'm just happy to be walking and talking.
Yeah.
So he comes in. Well, I stay in that room like a bad little boy. Of course, this is back before they had TVs in the rooms, like they do now, and like in hotels. None of that existed at that time. So just bored to tears, waiting in my room like a bad little boy for the general to call. And it wasn't until about 3 or 4 in that afternoon I get a call. And it's the general. And we've gotten to know each other well since then, but he was a sharp guy, and he was in his 3rd year of command. He knew what the heck he was doing, and very, very on top of things kind of guy. But he just told me, he said, first thing he asked is, how are you? And I told him, hey, we're fine. And the airplane, we put a new nose cone on it. It's up. It's ready to go. And we were very fortunate, and I told him what had happened. He said, Jeff, when that message hit Washington, D.C., the Joint Chiefs of Staff, they took it to mean that, you wrote in the message that your nose impacted his stabulator of the guy's aircraft. So they thought you were overzealous.
That you hit him.
Yeah, pressing a fight, and that you ran into him. And I said, General, that's not what happened. He never saw me, and I never saw him until he flew in front of me. And that's what occurred. I said, 2 feet back we would have missed, 2 feet forward we would have been
obliterated. Really bad, yeah.
That was how fast we were both going.
Yeah.
And so he said, well, I hear what you're saying, but he said, our commandant is very upset. And because the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the chairman, is very upset.
Wow.
And so he said, I'm sending a investigating officer up there from the wing headquarters, and he'll do a formal investigation. And he said, I've got to tell you, Jeff, I want to be honest with you. I'm going to have to relieve you of command for what has occurred. And I said, well, General, I don't understand that because, he broke the rules of engagement. It wasn't my fault. He ran into me. And he said, yeah, but it looks like you did that. Everybody in Washington thinks you rammed him.
Wow.
And I said, okay. So he said, don't worry, we'll investigate it and then we'll see what comes out of this. But he said, I just want to make sure you understand that you might lose your command.
And tell the people listening who don't have a military background, what's the impact of being relieved from
if you're relieved of command for cause, their lack of faith in you or what have you, as a career officer, you're normally a guy who gets the command is really thinking seriously about 20 plus years and staying in, and that just ends your career.
That's it. Like wipes it out.
Yeah, wipes it out. You're not going to get promoted anymore. You're not going to get good assignments. You'll end up on somebody's staff somewhere, until
it's humiliating.
Until you leave with your tail between your legs. And so it was that was not good news. I had a lump in my gut from our conversation. I just felt awful. And after he called me, I'm there in that room sitting there by myself, and I'm just
terrible.
I prayed. I just felt so sorry for myself because of the injustice of it and what have you. And so about that time, by this time it's about 5 or 6 in the evening, and my guys, some of my pilots come by and hammer on the door and say, "Hey, Skipper, come on, let's go eat some chow over at the club." And so I said, "I'll be there. I need to take a shower." And so I braced up and wanted to give the brave hero approach to, don't let them know what the issue was.
You weren't going to tell them.
No.
So you're now in the middle of, we talked about this a few moments ago, you're in the middle of a Marine Corps American crisis of this other wingman's causing. It's
sort of a personal crisis.
Right, it's overlapping.
But yet the command is affected since I was in command of that squadron.
Yeah. The crisis is somewhere back in America, the higher-ups are trying to figure out what happened.
Yeah.
Is this a big deal? And we're managing this delicate relationship between two allies.
Yes.
And so that's happening, and it's playing out. And meanwhile, there's a personal Beak Howell crisis of...
I'm the goat.
It looks like you're about to get blown out of your...
Yes.
You might as well have quit with the slashing of tires a couple years before if this is how it was going to... Yeah.
Maybe that was an ample warning.
Right. So then what happens?
Well, then I go over to have dinner with my guys.
Okay.
And, I'm not drinking. There's no drinking when you're feeling like I'm feeling.
I know, feel terrible.
And I can't hardly eat, but I'm trying to, they're asking me, what's going on? You talked to, you got a call? I said, yeah. I said, we're going to talk again in the morning. There's an investigating officer coming up. And so we're grounded until they get through all this. And so they could sense that I was not the happiest man around, but I was trying not to lay it on them. It wasn't their issue. And so
you didn't want to do poor Beak.
Yeah. So we didn't do that kind
So you're going to carry that part of the burden alone.
Fearless leader kind of stuff.
Okay.
And so halfway through our meal, a waitress comes up and looking for Lieutenant Colonel Howell. There's a phone in the manager's office from the wing headquarters. And so I go running in there.
I'm sure you do.
And it's the chief of staff of the wing. He's a colonel. He's an ornery cuss.
Yeah.
And I know him well, and still don't like him. But I get on the phone, I answer you, I say, this is Lieutenant Colonel Howell, and he just chews me out because he said it'd taken an hour to get a hold of me, to find me and get a hold of me. And he said, I've been looking for you for over an hour, and just about the time you got on this phone, and
wearing you out.
He just had at me, and I'm thinking, today has not been my day.
Can't get the break.
And it's yes, sir, no, sir, yes, sir, no, sir. And so he said, okay, here's the reason I called. He said, our commanding general got a call from the commander of the Japanese Air Defense Force, the head of their Air Force.
Ugh.
And he said, they take full responsibility for what happened. He said it was their fault. Their guy did not follow the rules of the road, a flight, and so he said he just wanted to let them know that this had been great training for his people, the best training they've had in years. They want to continue it. He said, since both aircraft are flyable or can be fixed and are flyable, nobody was hurt. The Japanese want to make this a non-happening. He actually said that. I want to make this a non-happening. And I never heard that word before.
That's a new one.
I sort of liked it.
Yes.
And so he said, so here's what I want you, what's the status of your aircraft? I said, they're up. I said, we got them all fixed and they're up and ready to go. And we go back to training tomorrow. He said, okay, that's what you'll do. He said, we're going to send an investigating officer up. But you continue flying, and this will all pass because it's going to be a non-happening. And
Wow.
General Maloney's already talked to headquarters, and they got that straightened out. And so they, the investigating officer ended up there several days later, flew up from Japan, but it was all just taking notes and going through the motions.
Sure.
And so we continued the training and flew the next day. And I got to tell you, I didn't realize how very careful I was.
If you didn't hit another plane, that's
I
right.
don't have another midair. So we got through that okay and got back, and squadron got back to Hawaii a couple of months later, and I gave up my command regularly and got orders top level school, and life went on very well. As a matter of fact, I ended up my last month there in command in Hawaii. What was ironic about it was I got a call from my brigade commanding general there. We were in the 1st Marine Brigade there in Hawaii. He said we've just gotten a message that the Navy League of the United States has an award they give every year to an officer in the naval service for inspirational leadership, John Paul Jones Award. He said, they're giving you this award.
Wow.
And I'm thinking, oh my God. And he said, we want you and your wife to come to Washington, D.C. to be presented by their convention, the Navy League and all that stuff. And so that actually occurred. And I'll never forget, that was about a month later, right before I was going to have a change of command. And, and Janelle and I went to Washington and were wined and dined and treated like heroes. And all these admirals and generals come up and shake my hand and congratulate. I was the first Marine to get the John Paul Jones Award.
Wow.
So it was quite an
honor,
an event. And I'll never forget coming back on the airliner back to Hawaii, good old United Airlines flight to Hawaii, and in the middle of the night over the Pacific, and how my conscience, I felt so guilty about getting that award because I felt like there were so many other leaders I knew, both Marines and sailors, who were better leaders than I was, and I was striving to be a better leader, but I just felt guilty as hell that they had been given that award, and I just didn't feel like I deserved it. But then I sort of, said a prayer and thinking to myself, okay, Hal, what are you going to do about this? This has happened, so what are you going to do about it? And then I said, from here on out, I'm going to become a student of leadership, and I'm going to strive to be the best leader I can possibly be. And that's when I really got dead serious about following the leadership principles and doing things that leaders should do, and really got dead serious about it. Prior to that, it was just sort of playing by ear and doing okay.
Sure.
But because I was pretty good at it anyway, but obviously I needed to improve.
Yeah.
So that occurred. That was all that happened in my last month in command in Hawaii, there in Hawaii. It was just wonderful.
Hello, Musers. Now it's time for a commercial break. Today I'm going to tell you a little something about our strategic planning products. Did you know most companies don't have a strategy and most strategic plans aren't strategic? And that just doesn't sound right to us. We'll help you convene your core leadership team and shape a strategy and a strategic plan that's just right for your organization. We offer 6, 9, and 12 session packages led by facilitators with doctorates in management or related fields who also have decades of experience in business. We'll help you leverage your core competencies and your unique insights into a competitive advantage. Contact us at ondemandleadership.com. We're looking forward to hearing from you.
I want to talk about the impact of the crisis manager's emotions in managing a crisis. So in a 48-hour period in Japan, you went from doing great, doing this wonderful training, till you have this mid-air collision, and you think everything's going to be fine, and then you get the word that you're probably going to get relieved, and then you get the word after that, you know what, it's going to be a non-happening. And So how do you, what recommendations or advice do you have for trying to manage your own emotions when you're in the middle of a crisis like that?
That's a good question. I guess all my leadership experiences prior to that sort of prepared me to stay calm. That's the first thing you do. You stay calm and you try to keep a stiff upper lip and not let your people know, don't lay it on your people, and make them confident that things are going to be okay, and keep the sunny side up kind of deal. And so that's sort of what I was striving to do. And so it worked out okay. And also I had incredible faith in the Marine Corps. I'm probably gullible, but from the moment I went to Officers Candidate School, I fell in love with the aspirations and the maxims of the Marine Corps about respect and honor and those kind of things, and you treat other people that way, they will treat you back, and that kind of thing. And so it sort of, I tried to keep that faith during that time that it was going to work out, even though I just felt despondent given the general's honesty in telling me I'm probably going to have to relieve you of command. One thing I didn't mention is on that conversation, he said, well, Jeff, you're finding out that the further you go up the flagpole, the easier it is to get shot down. And that was quite a shock to hear that. Yeah. But he was right. Yeah. But it was remarkable that it all ended up so well. Yeah. And I feel very fortunate.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you want to learn more about the topic, check out our show notes. And if you want to help us out, like, share, subscribe, and 5 stars are all deeply appreciated. See you next time on the Management Muse.